Hello, welcome to Goldster Purpose, Passion and Grit, where we have an hour-long conversation with people from all walks of life who have struggled, overcome obstacles, been propelled by a passion, found purpose and the grit to see things through. We talk to explorers, sports stars, people who have suffered personal tragedy. And today on that strain, but a little or maybe way out of the box, we meet a guest who has had an incredible life of ups, downs, trauma, bravery and breakthrough. On his formal resume, our guest is a former supervisory special agent and profiler for America's Federal Bureau of Investigation, a former New York City prosecutor, and he's a speaker and trainer for SpyX, a grouping and agency with access to leaders from the world's top intelligence and security institutions. He's also an author and film producer, and he uses television to catch the bad guys. But, and this is a big but, our guest has a far more textured story to tell. Age 15, he was sexually abused by the leader of his summer camp. He was determined to bring that criminal to justice and went undercover to help the FBI arrest him. He then joined the FBI and he worked undercover numerous times. We're going to hear about catching financial crooks. He told his own government that torture was taking place at Guantanamo Bay Detention Center for Islamic terrorists, and that remains a massive controversy and denial there. He was at the scene of the Twin Tower collapse in September 2001, breathing such toxic poisons that he now has cancer, and he is currently recovering from COVID. And at the moment, I have to tell you that our guest is in California, where the time is 4 a.m. What a trooper. A very special welcome, Jim Clemente, to Goldster Purpose, Passion and Grit.
Thank you so much. I'm free. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Jim. Now, is it late night or early morning where you are?
Well, for me, personally, at this moment, it's late night because it's easier for me to stay up than it is for me to wake up early in the morning.
Okay, and I love your studio. Can you see whether the sun's up or down where you are?
Yeah, I can definitely tell you the sun is nowhere near up. It's still a few hours away from being up.
Okay, and this is where you do your shows and your podcasts?
I do. I record my podcast, Best Case, Worst Case, and Real Crime Profile out of this studio.
That's brilliant. Now, in a moment, I'm going to start at the beginning when you were 15. And that story there, but to anchor us in your professional skills, what exactly is a profiler? What is an FBI profiler?
Well, profiling is actually reverse engineering crime scene behavior. So you look at what occurred at the crime scene and you reverse engineer back to the type of person who committed that crime. We look at the behavior, we look at the victimology choice, we look at pre and post offense behavior, how much preparation went into a crime, and also how much time and effort the offender spent with the victims.
Right. And are there any specific traits you can see in somebody that you says, well, this is a serial killer, this is a domestic passion, crime of passion? Is there those sort of things you can check?
Well, there are certainly clues left at the crime scene of those types of crimes. And so, for example, there was a woman killed in Queens recently, but the circumstances showed the offender used a knife found in the kitchen. The stabbings, there were multiple stabbings showing some rage, and that's probably because there was a connection between them. And the offender moved the body from her home where he killed her out and dumped her in the public. Nobody would spend more time with that body than necessary because it means you could get caught easier. So we know there's already a connection, a known connection, and he wanted to move the body away from where they would find her.
Okay, that is fascinating.
So he wasn't a serial killer. He was inept at doing what he did because he was on all the security cameras down the block.
Yeah, so he was an amateur domestic killer.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to go back to a lot of that, but I want to start now during your childhood, because when you went to summer camp when you were 15, but at that time when you walked into the summer camp, you didn't expect to be a law enforcement officer, did you? What was going? Did you want to be a train driver, a pilot, a spaceman? What was going through your head?
Well, as a kid, I had dyslexia, so I stayed away from English and history and focused on math and science. I loved science. I loved figuring things out. And so I thought I would be a scientist. And I eventually did become a chemistry major in college. But at that summer camp, I just it was the first time I was away from home. It was me starting to grow up and explore things and learn things. And I learned how to chop down trees and row a boat, and I became a lifeguard there. And so all those things were important milestones for me in my youth.
Important milestones, chopping down trees, that outdoor life, but also something pretty dreadful happened too.
Yeah, definitely. I was groomed and sexually victimized by the director of the camp, and it was done in such a way where I was separated, and he asked me to stay on at camp after everybody else left to help him close down the camp, and I thought this was an honor, and but what he was actually doing was isolating me. So I was on 6,000 acres of woods in a cabin 60 miles away from home and he was my ride home. So I really didn't have any way to escape. And I said he groomed me. He allowed me to drive a car before I was had a license or a permit. He gave me alcohol and he gave me porno magazines, and those things, drinking, driving, and dirty pictures,
Yeah.
those things are typically used by offenders to groom adolescent males.
So you didn't tell anybody about this, is that right?
Well, I didn't tell anybody in my family, my parents, because we didn't talk about sex at home. And I thought I would just get in trouble for even mentioning the words. But I did tell the priest at my high school when school started up again. And he told me, say 10 Our Fathers and 10 Hail Marys and never speak of this again. Turns out that priest was molesting other boys in my high school. And he's the one who sent me to this camp.
Oh my, so was there a ring? Was there a
Well, I don't know if it was a ring or just like-minded individuals protecting each other, but um, that seems to be what happened.
So you were 15 when that happened. How old were you when you decided to go after the man that groomed you and
Well,
molested?
actually, it was interesting. My older brother gave me a call and said, "Hey, now that you're a prosecutor," and I believe I was probably 25 at the time,
It's New
and
York, so you were a prosecutor in New York State, were you?
New York City, yes.
New York City.
And he called me up and said, "Hey, now that you're a prosecutor, we should go after the director of that camp we were at when we were kids." And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "Well, one time when nobody was around, I snuck into his office and I found 3 paper bags filled with Polaroid pictures of him molesting boys." And I said, "I thought I was the only one." And the next day I went to the FBI NYPD Joint Sexual Exploitation of Children Task Force, met with an agent and a detective from NYPD and told them my story. What was crazy though was as I was telling them the story, I started shaking just like I did when I was being molested as a kid. It was like I was thrown back. I had tried to bury it. It was never gone, but when I started talking about it again, I kind of relived the experience. And luckily the agent and the detectives that I worked with and the prosecutor were fantastic, and they did an incredible investigation, but they couldn't locate anybody within the statute of limitations. It was only a 5 or 7 year statute of limitations at the time, and it was already 10 years beyond when I was being victimized. So what ended up happening was they asked me to go undercover and wear wire and meet with him. And I said, that's the last thing I wanted to do. But the craziest thing happened as I'm filling out my information for my bar application. I had waited till the last minute because you had to put every place you ever lived or worked. And so I didn't want to put the camp down. So I fill it out. I go in to my law school to hand in my application. They attach my records and then send it off to the bar. And the offender is sitting behind the desk as the night registrar for my law school. I couldn't believe it. I had just convinced myself that I'd never see this guy again. And
Yeah.
there he is. He had just been fired from his 13th Catholic school
Right.
after there was an accusation, and they just let him walk away. And then he got a job at my law school
Oh my
right
goodness.
down the street from where I live.
And that made you decide to go after him, did it?
Absolutely. I said, I got out of there. I got up, picked up the phone. I called the agents. I said, come wire me up. Let's do it. And I met with him 6 times, and eventually we got enough evidence to lock him up.
Just to sort of, how do you wire yourself up?
Well, you don't do it yourself.
Okay.
So an FBI agent and a detective came, and they literally, at that time, there's sort of a waistband that you put on that had a recording device in it, and then wires that came up to my shirt collar, and that's where the microphones were. And you literally have to walk around. You feel this. You're so conscious of the fact that you have this on you. It's very, very distressing, actually.
And so when you see them being wired up in the movies, that's actually what it's like, is it? It's not.
Yeah, well, if you like Wall Street, for example, Charlie Sheen, I'm the one that was the tech advisor for him in that movie, and I taught him about what happened to me at this point, and he used that in his role as a guy who became an informant for the FBI.
Okay, well, that's a quite a interest, because you nailed the guy that abused you, and then the FBI offered you a job, and then
That's right.
you did this wiring up and undercover stuff became part of your DNA. But you mentioned Wall Street. You did the financial stuff as well, didn't you?
I did. I was undercover for 3 years on the floor of the NYMEX on Wall Street, and it was the first time the FBI.
That's the stock exchange, is it? It's that.
Well, it's the NYMEX, the New York Mercantile Exchange. So the stock exchange sells stocks, the NYMEX sells commodities. So it's the same thing, only it's a little more antiquated. At the time I was there, it wasn't electronic trading. It was all hand and eye signals that the trades were done through. And I was there for 3 years. It was the first time the FBI ever put in a deep cover agent into a fiduciary position. So I actually had to test and get my licenses to trade, and then traded actual crude oil futures for about 2.5 years after that.
So hold on, you had to train to be a trader.
I did that on my own. I got a job as a clerk and watched how they did it, and then studied the books, and then took the tests and became an actual broker.
And who were you
Generally,
looking for?
well, there were people in the pit that were trading, that were, anytime they had a bad trade, they'd pawn it off on somebody else's customer. Anytime they had a good trade coming, they would show their friends, and then they would trade ahead of it. Sometimes they would bid up the market for no reason at all, just so they could make money selling it at the high, buying it back at the low. They were doing a lot of stuff.
So you were going after a bad practice culture instead of one sort of Mr. Big godfather of,
Exactly.
Bernie Madoff, or you weren't going after a big character.
Right.
We've
Very
had
well put.
Philip Green and people here and Robert Maxwell that are doing. You were going after the whole culture of how something works, were you?
I was.
Have you fixed it, or is it still bad?
Well, now they have electronic trading, so that they can't do the things that they were doing before.
Just give me an example, because we've seen pictures of these crazy stuff, everybody going like this, as you say, in the stock market. Give me an example of what you were spotting and how you got evidence for it.
All right. Well, first thing I would say, if you just go to YouTube and look up Robert Downey Jr. on the commodities exchange, you'll see a video of him on the floor, and then he comes out and he gives every expletive you could possibly imagine about that experience. He was there for 30 minutes. I was there for 3 years. It was insane. These people were so tightly knit. They all helped each other, but anybody outside the pit, they didn't care about at all. So any of their customers, they don't mind if they're screwing them, as long as they don't lose money. So I'd see guys, for example, my boss told me that when I have a big like if I'm going to buy 1,500 contracts of crude oil, that's Each contract is 10,000 barrels. Each penny it goes up is $10,000. So
Okay.
if I'm buying 1,500 contracts and I say to the guy next to me, I'll save you 500. He buys them quietly now and then sells them to me as I bid up the market.
Okay.
He sells them back to me at the highest price. So I've just given him the profit that should have gone to my customer.
So the law that they were breaking was manipulating the customer or cheating the customer? What was the
It was fraud against the customer. It was mail fraud and wire fraud and a whole bunch of trading regulations that they violated.
And now with the oil prices going up, the Ukraine war, all of that stuff has got to be happening again or now. What do you reckon is going on there now? So practice.
Well, I'm sure it's a little more difficult now because it's all done electronically. So there's no way for somebody to do a side deal. But I also know these people are fairly sophisticated and they develop ways around the rules.
Okay. So the culture, I mean, one FBI agent working undercover on the floor is not going to change a mindset of culture. So the Wall Street culture we saw, that you advised on that film and all those other sort of crooked, corporate movies that we see, that hasn't changed.
I don't think it has. I mean, because since then we've had Bernie Madoff, for example, who did a tremendous amount of damage to just, I mean, literally millions of people were suffered because of what he had done. A lot of pensions were just destroyed.
Yeah. So you did 3 years on the financial, but you also went undercover again. We have a question from one of the audience, Jean Joyce, is, did you feel in danger while you were undercover? Should I say, when did you feel in danger when you were undercover? Give us some other examples there.
Well, for example, one time I was undercover as a bum on the Bowery, somebody who was begging for money, just living on the sidewalks. We were going after a bank robber who had escaped from prison in Boston, and we had guys in the restaurant across the street and in the business down the way. But I actually sat right next to the place where his girlfriend went for methadone every day. We thought he might come and meet her there, and he did show up, and I chased him down. And that was a little risky because he was a violent bank robber. But of course, many times we went after armored car robbers, bank robbers who were armed. You always are aware of the risk, but I spent the last 12 years chasing child abductors, serial killers, and of course, those are not very nice people.
Give us an example. You say it as if it's sort of commonplace to you, which it is, but for us, it's fascinating. Give us that scene again. You were sitting as a bum, expecting, but there were other people in cafes and watching from here, watching that. This is called a stakeout, is it? How does that actually?
It is. Well, for 2 weeks, we sat there in different positions. I volunteered to do it. I borrowed some clothes from a friend of mine who was a roofer, so they were covered with tar and they stunk. And I wore a bulletproof vest underneath and basically a plastic garbage bag over the bulletproof vest so you couldn't see that, and then my clothes or my friend's clothes. And we would all go up and beg for money from cars and then buy some cheap wine, and then they would pass the bottle around. I always bought my own bottle. I didn't want to share. I'm sorry. But
did you put it on expenses?
But what was amazing was that the stories from these guys, one of the guys I was hanging out with on the street, his son was a doctor at NYU. And he told me this story about how he would go to the lobby and make a phone call, page his son, just so he could see him, and then leave without his son seeing him because he was so embarrassed about his condition.
God. What was it, because he was an addict, or?
Well, I think he was an alcoholic. Yeah.
I mean, that's
it was sad, but some of these people, just were unfortunate and they were living on the streets.
But
And
saying that, just to go back to you've piqued my curiosity on the financial thing. Were you mixing with these guys? Were you going drinking with them and
yes, I
talking them?
was, and that was the most difficult part of it, because I would every now and then I would just go to the restroom and pour out whatever drink I had and fill it back up with water, and just because I didn't want to get drunk, and also just I didn't like hanging out with these guys. I mean, a lot of them were complete jerks, and they would do really nasty, bad things, but I had to pretend I was one of them, and that's part of the difficulty of being an undercover agent.
Did
Also, every now and then you find somebody that you like, and you have to stay away from that person, or else they might be caught up in the crimes you're committing.
Okay, so when you say, they were bad guys, did they have a moral compass at all? I mean, you obviously, you had one because of what, but is this a whole set of people that are not on the same planet as us?
Well, I think if you watch that little video from Robert Downey
Yeah.
Jr., you'll see exactly what they're like. And they, I think it's a lot of it is sort of like mob mentality. When they get together in this mob and these groups, they feel they're invincible. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah. And when we had the financial crash, which I think was after your time there, 2008, and everything went
Mhm.
like this,
Right.
these were the people that were running the financial institutions.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And they made out like bandits. I mean, they were, you know, putting these terrible mortgages together in packages, calling them AAA rated, selling them for inflated prices, and getting insurance on them failing. So they got paid for selling it, and then they got reimbursed through the insurance. They made out like bandits, millions, hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars. And of course, the homeowners are the ones who lost.
I can see your passion and your outrage there, Jim. So when you saw some of those guys get arrested, presumably they were after your work, how did that feeling compared to when your child abuser was arrested? In your
Well,
personal feeling there?
There was a lot more personal connection and I don't call him my child abuser. I call him the offender who committed crimes against me and I think this is good for everyone who's listening, not to connect that person to me forever, or to anybody else who's victimized by anybody. But when he was arrested and went to jail, obviously there was a very personal connection, and I feel like it turned something negative in my life into something very positive because that's how I became an FBI agent. When I arrested people or helped testify and convicted people when I was an FBI agent, literally the passion is gone. We try to have this clinical detachment. This is not about some emotional, victory. This is about finding justice for the victims. I always focused on them and not on the offender. I forgot their names. I literally flushed the names of the bad people out of my head and try to remember just the victims.
And when you were doing in the financial thing, because I want to move on to your other cases in a second. And when they were arrested or you were arresting them, did they sort of say, "Oh my God, he's an undercover cop"? Did they sort of?
And the financial thing, yes, it shocked a bunch of people, but also there was the head of the Commodities Futures Trading Commission who was appointed. I think her name was Wendy Graham. She did an interview in which she said, "Oh, our undercover operations on the NYMEX are doing really well." So she outed us. Then the NYMEX hired Kroll Associates, which is a big security agency, staffed in part by retired FBI agents,
Yeah.
to root us out. I was the first one to become a broker. There was another guy after me that became a broker, and there's 4 other people as clerks on the floor trying to root us out. And we had to get through all sorts of stuff because of that. So it was very difficult. But so they were shocked, but not shocked.
Yeah.
They
So
were
so you
shocked
were
that I was the one because they didn't think I could be an FBI agent. I've
so
had guys pull me aside and say, "We got to be careful when we're doing this illegal trade because there's FBI agents around here." I was like, "Oh."
So you're like a trained actor as well as
Well, it's, I always say that, acting is a really tough job, learning somebody's lines and so forth. But when you're undercover, you're literally three people. You're
yeah,
yourself, right? You're still the person you are. You're the person you're pretending to be, and you're investigating a crime. So you have to triple think everything you say and do. And it's very
yeah. God,
24/7.
yeah, 24/7. You can't give us a story from one of the other cases, because after that you went after child abusers, didn't you? Did a lot of children cases. Give us the most prominent one there, how that worked.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, but I will say there's one case, Davri Chen, who was abducted. He was a 6-year-old boy in Seattle, and I got the call 23 hours into the abduction. And it's unfortunate, but 44% of kids who are abducted and killed are killed in the first hour, 73% in the first 3 hours, 99% in the first 24 hours. And I got the call 23 hours into it. I had to act quickly. I assessed the situation. I found out that they were saying they're looking for a monster predator who stole this kid. And I said, this is so bad. What you have to do is change the face of the person you're looking for. You should say, this is the person who was last known to have been seen with him. He could be a hero. We're looking for a hero, because people don't see
I see what you mean.
monster predator when they see their neighbor or their friend or guys that they see mowing the lawn. And I knew this guy was local because he was actually spotted 3 times in the neighborhood
Yeah.
before anybody raised the alarm. So I changed that media strategy, and then I said, just ask people, anybody who owns this kind of a car in this neighborhood, very close nearby. And so they had 2 people who had the car. One of them didn't answer the door when they did the neighborhood canvas. I said, kick in the door now. The cop said, what are you, crazy? We know nothing about this person. I said, you got to do it. Kick in the door now. His life is already at risk. And so they hemmed and hawed. I went all the way up to the chief of police and then all the way to the district attorney, and said the constitutional, excuse me, allows you in exigent circumstances to search any child-sized container for the safety of the child. That's all you're doing. You're not searching for evidence. You're searching for the safety of the child. They kicked in the door. They said, he's here. He's alive. And that was the greatest moment of my career.
And the guy was there, the abductor was there too, and taken away?
Nope. When they staged the SWAT raid, they were around the corner at a bingo hall.
Yeah.
His apartment overlooked that bingo hall. He saw them coming. He took off, but we staked out his car, and at 3 a.m. he came back to get it, and that's when he was arrested.
Goodness, and you mentioned that you had to go up to the chief of police and everything. There was the police and the FBI there. Jean Joyce asks again, do the police resent the FBI's involvement? How does that work?
No, that's mostly TV. There's some political stuff that goes on in the high echelons, but the street agents that work with cops every day, we have a great working relationship. And the behavioral analysis unit where I worked almost exclusively worked with other law enforcement agencies, state and local and city cops. And we had, a very symbiotic relationship in that they would come to us because we got to study all these cases, everyone in the United States and many around the world. So we just shared our information with them. We helped them, and then we disappear into the night. We don't take the credit for it.
Okay. So the authority goes from if I'm right, the county sheriff to the county to the state to the federal. Is that right?
Well, there are some crimes like child abduction where there's co-jurisdiction, and in serial kill cases, there's co-jurisdiction. But most of the time when we work with local or state or city agencies, we're there by invitation. We're there to help, and we offer our services. And if they don't need it, they don't get it. There's plenty of cases to go around.
Okay, that's Suri asked, what is the name of the person to watch the clips with? That was Robert Downey Jr., wasn't it?
Yes, Robert Downey Jr. And it just put Robert Downey Jr. Commodities Exchange, and you'll see, you'll be shocked. You might have to cover your ears for some of the words that come out of his mouth, but
Okay.
it's and again, he was there for half an hour.
Yeah,
just so you know.
Robert Downey, I think the highest paid film star in Hollywood, or he was a few years ago.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think he's made up to, something like $78 million for one movie.
Yeah, yes. And you've advised this on several movies, have you, Jim? Or
oh yeah, sure. I was a tech advisor on a number of movies, but then also on Criminal Minds for the entire series. And then I became, when I retired from the FBI, season 6, I became a writer and producer on the show full time, and then ran out the entire season, 15 seasons. But the writer's room has started again. Season 16 is coming.
Oh, you're going to tell us about that in a few minutes in detail.
Okay.
Because
no,
it's great. What's it's going to call the writers room? We're going to, and also how you use television to catch bad guys. That whole thing. But I want to move on to 9/11 now. You were what they call a first responder. You went to the site. Why did you go to the site, and what were the personal results for you from that?
Well, I went to the site because when I was undercover, I lived across the street from the World Trade Center. And my father's best man, his best friend, was the project manager for the Port Authority when it was being built. And my father's office had been on the 93rd floor of the World Trade Center. There's a lot of personal connections between me and that building. Luckily, my father had retired by 9/11, but I went because there was a need. People don't understand how huge that complex is. 150,000 people work there. That's bigger than most cities across the United States. And when I saw the first tower come down, I literally, my legs gave out. I mean, I collapsed. I couldn't believe it. It was like seeing a mountain disappear. And I got in my car. I was teaching a class in Quantico, Virginia, and at the FBI Academy. And the instructors in the class next to me were teaching bomb techs. And I knew that all of the New York office bomb techs were in that room, except for one person, Lenny Hatton, who was left behind in case something happened in New York. And I was the one that ran in there and told them what was going on. And they thought it was like an exercise for the school, and kind of were, just putting me off. And then all their beepers went off, and they all got on a plane and flew up to New York. Had it not been for that class, all the other New York City bomb techs would have probably perished. Lenny Hatton is the only FBI agent who was killed that day because he ran in to help save people while everybody was running out. But all those bomb techs would have been there, and they probably would have suffered the same fate.
And when you got there, you were breathing in or getting contaminated by...
Well, you have to understand, this was literally, it was 1 billion tons of debris burning for weeks, and all the asbestos and plastic and jet oil and everything was burning. And we had these masks with the 2 little filters on them, but they got clogged up in a matter of hours, and literally we couldn't breathe through them anymore, so we had to take them off. But we were literally like an anthill army, just filling up buckets of debris and passing it back and throwing it in dumpsters, because machinery couldn't get into the middle of the pile. And we were hoping we had dogs that would sniff out to see if they could find people, and then we would dig in an area. But many times we were digging with our hands on our knees, and you would open up an air pocket and just green flames would come shooting out. It was very bad, but we were trying to save lives. And so, it's just one of the risks you take. I ended up getting cancer from it. I know you said earlier that I have cancer, but I have been in remission for 17 years. I had a bone marrow transplant 17 years ago, and I've been doing very well since then. I was one of the lucky ones. Unfortunately, just last year, we lost 3 other FBI agents from cancer. And
the people that were with you working at Ground Zero, it was called then, did they get cancer as well?
Well, yeah, I know several that did. I know that at the time I got cancer, there were 80 cops and firemen and 8 other FBI agents who all had the same kind of lymphoma that I had. And since then, the number is as high as 1,700 people who were first responders who've gotten cancer.
Got it. And then, well, it's great to hear you're in remission. And this went on to become the post 9/11 scenario from which Guantanamo Bay came, the Iraq and Afghanistan came. But were you undercover then? You discovered torture going on by US government agencies. Tell us about that.
Well, I was asked as an expert in interview and interrogation, I was asked to go down with some of my colleagues from the Behavioral Analysis Unit to evaluate their interrogation program because it wasn't getting any results. As soon as I got down there, the very first interrogation plan that I was given started, it was labeled fear up, person down. And in other words, they wanted to scare these people as much as they could and take away any humanity they had. And this is exactly the opposite of the way to get accurate and reliable information. So I obviously did not approve that plan, and I started basically fighting the people who were trying to implement this plan. Eventually, what I did was say, "Give me the worst detainee you have here, and I'll show you what you should do." And basically, this guy was a hafiz, meaning he memorized the Quran when he was a kid. And anytime anybody came in to interrogate him, he would just look straight ahead or close his eyes and recite the Quran from memory, ignoring anybody or anything that was done to him. So I sat there for 2 hours and watched him pray. And when he took a breath after 2 hours, I said, I'm sorry to interrupt your prayers, but I just wanted to talk to you, introduce myself. And I did. And then he stopped praying. He listened to me. I respected him. I gave him dignity. I gave him choices. I allowed him to be a human being. I built a bond of rapport with him. I shared things from my life. I shared what happened to me as a kid and why I was really disappointed with the church I grew up in. And I told him, "You're the smartest, most educated detainee here. I would love to learn the nuances of your culture and your faith." And he was happy to teach me. And after 11 days of meeting with him, he said, "Jim, my friend, what can I do for you?" And he became cooperative. And I showed them that. But there was still a major pushback. And the General Miller, literally said to me after I proved all that, "Well, my boys know what they're doing. Have a nice day." He left Guantanamo to go to Abu Ghraib to, quote, Gitmoize Abu Ghraib. He was running Abu Ghraib when all that mess came out, and they let him retire. And some 18-year-old female soldier is the only one who's ever been prosecuted for that kind of stuff.
So
And
there
it's
was
just outrageous.
Was this a culture between different agencies? You were FBI, there was a CIA, there was a military, there were other agencies there. Was it a different culture that they had?
Of course, yes. There were some CIA agents who were pretending to be FBI agents doing bad things. There were military people who were encouraged. They literally would have like pep rallies before they went in to interrogate these people to get them all charged up and hateful. and trying to push the boundaries of the torture statute. And this was a mistake. And eventually, myself and one of my colleagues, we got the word out, and they shut down that kind of treatment to the detainees, and they changed the military interrogation manual to only rapport-based interrogation manual.
That took some time, because as you
It did take time. It took
the
years.
stuff where, and that was for the people that don't remember that was where those dreadful pictures came out of prisoners with sort of being led around on all fours with like dogs, and sort of stood on a pole with things
right,
around.
which is, they thought that they could torture and intimidate these people into helping us. The fact is that they live a much harder life than we live. Yeah. When we treat them badly, it reinforces all the negative stereotypes they had of us as Americans, all of this stuff that had been ingrained in their head. But if you undermine those expectations by being nice, by giving them dignity and respect, they realize you're a human being just like they are. And you build that bond and that bridge of rapport, and you actually can talk and listen to each other and make headway, which is what I did.
So what you discovered there, was that a sort of FBI turf fight against CIA military or whatever?
Well, here's the thing.
The FBI have your back on that?
Well, at the beginning, they just thought I couldn't get along with people. The FBI was like, why can't you get along with people? Then I was able to communicate with them about what was going on, and then they were totally on my side. But as soon as we found out that this was going on, we did everything we could to shut it down. But the thing is, it wasn't like a turf war. I mean, if anybody had reason to hate the people who killed 3,000 people on 9/11, I did. But I also knew that if we were ever going to prosecute these people, you have to actually do it by constitutionally sound methods. You can't interrogate somebody with coercion or worse, torture, and then expect to be able to use that information in a court of law. And which is why today there's never been one successful prosecution of any of the detainees.
They're just releasing them, aren't they? And keeping, they still got a few dozen there, haven't they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
they do.
Angie asked a question which I think will get us into our next thing, which is your TV and authoring career. But does the rapid development of digital tech only make for better detection of crime, or is it also making it easier for perpetrators to hide their tracks via encryption, the dark web, et cetera, et cetera?
Wow, Angie, that was a great question and very complicated. It makes it easier because we now have databases like VICAP, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, that keeps the details of all these really weird, bizarre crimes across geographic locations and time in one place. So if you have something that happens, you can put your data in and find out if the same thing has happened somewhere else. You have that. But also, criminals are being so much more sophisticated in the digital space, and phishing and targeted phishing and all sorts of different ways that people use social engineering to find out information and try to hack passwords and get into people's accounts. Now we're vulnerable in so many ways. Every device we have is connected to these offenders. They can get access to it and then exploit the information they get from it. So it makes offenders and offending so much easier. It also, in the area of child sex crimes, it brings offenders into your child's bedroom, and that is really scary.
Yeah. So when they're on the webs talking to their friends on, whatever.
Yeah, they don't know if their friends that they're gaming with are actually age appropriate peers, or if they're 57-year-old guys who are pretending to be a 14-year-old kid.
Well, what exactly is phishing?
Phishing is P-H-I.
Not fishing with a rod.
Not F-I-S-H, but P-I. Excuse me.
P-H-I-S-H.
Yeah, isn't it P-F-I-S-H-I-N-G? Okay, yeah. Sorry, I blanked out there. And what it is basically sending an email or a text message that looks like it's from your utility company or Amazon or somebody else, or Netflix or someone that you have a subscription to, and it says, "Oh, your account's been hacked. Click on this link to restart your password. Oh, you get $49 off or 49 pounds off if you click this link." And so all these kinds of ways, once you click that link, you have now allowed a virus to come into your computer. They can take over your computer, use it as a bot to attack other people. They can get the keystrokes that you make every time you go onto your bank site and find out what your password is, go in there when you're sleeping and steal all your money. Phishing is a very dangerous tool that's used to get access. And generally, for big corporations, it's one person who's on that computer system who gets an email, who clicks on a link, who then now makes the entire company vulnerable.
So that's how you get into the Pentagon or into Walmart or
Well,
something.
exactly. Yeah.
So you went on after you retired. I don't think you've ever retired, Jim. I'm not going to use that word, but after you moved on with your careers, you now have a very successful writing and film production career. But the one that caught my, and we haven't got time to go through them all, is America's Most Wanted. We have a show over here called Crime Watch, but I suspect that, and it's a similar concept. So you use television to catch the bad guys, is that right?
Yeah, we certainly do try. Yes.
So tell me about an America's Most Wanted. How does it work? Who did you catch?
Well, we did a reboot of America's Most Wanted. So John Walsh, who's unfortunately his son was abducted and murdered, he started the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He also started America's Most Wanted, and it was a show that went on for 25 years, and they caught something like 1,200 bad guys and women. And so we rebooted that, and we've aired 5 episodes so far. And basically there are so many fugitives out there that people can actually help because of social media. Now, when you're out doing, whatever you're doing, everybody has a camera with them now. Yeah. So you can now take pictures. Let's say you're taking a selfie and somebody's in the background. Oh my God, look at this. We showed actually life-size avatars of the offenders. So people knew not just these 2-dimensional pictures, but some of the most incredibly detailed avatars where you could actually see how tall they were, how big they looked, and we age progressed them if they were actually on the run for a very long time. So I would say that there are a number of people that I wish we had caught. We did a number of different exposés. We aired 5 episodes so far, and we actually caught 9 offenders.
5 episodes, 9. So on each episode, you have several different cases.
We tried to do a deep dive on 1 or 2, and then do a number of other ones that are a little bit more, smaller or local crimes, so that everyone in the country can be a part of it. In other words, we wanted to make sure that there were people from across America who could help us, who, not just crimes in New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago, but everywhere. And
so give us the most dangerous or notorious person that you caught in your 5 episodes there of the 9. Which ones?
Well, remember when I said that I try to forget the names of these offenders? I actually do, and there's a reason for it, because I work for the victims, and I can tell you that there was a very kind and loving father who was a security guard on a armored car truck, and he was simply picking up the cash from a movie theater, and a very bad person who like, I don't like to give them the light of day, to give their names, but a very bad person who just wanted money, just walked up behind him and and shot him in the back of the head and left him laying there on the sidewalk. And it's those kind of people who are extremely dangerous
Yeah.
to the world. It's those kind of people that need to be taken off the streets.
You
And
got it.
yeah, so that's a very important thing to do. And I think that's why John Walsh started the show, and he's a hero for doing it. And we we were just incredibly fortunate to be able to continue that legacy. Um, and we have Elizabeth Vargas as our host now, and she's great. She's a investigative journalist who really knows crime, and she's great. She's fantastic.
And what other shows? We're running out of time. Give us what's the big new show that you're working on at the moment?
Well, Criminal Minds season 16, they're bringing us back because last year, Criminal Minds, even though it had been taken off the air for 2 years,
Yeah.
it's the most streamed show in the world. And just to give you an idea, there's a whole new generation of younger people watching it now. There have been 4.6 billion TikToks made about Criminal Minds.
Good God.
4.6 billion.
And that's your
So,
show.
yeah, that's a show that I was the writer producer of for all those years, and I'm very proud of it because what I got to do was teach people while they're being entertained. I told you the statistics about child abduction homicides. And when I wrote my first scene for Criminal Minds, it was that Dr. Reed, who's our little genius, walks into a green screen, and all of a sudden he's out on a playground, and there's 10 kids playing around. And he says 44% are killed within the first hour. Half the kids disappear. And then he says 73% in the first 3 hours, and 3/4 of the kids are gone. And then he says 99% of the kids who are abducted and killed are killed within the first 24 hours. And there's one girl left swinging on the swing, and then the swing swings empty. And the hair stood up on the back of my neck when I had hair. And I realized in that 1 minute, I had taught 18 million people the urgency of acting quickly in a child abduction case.
Million. Yeah.
18 million and 63 million around the world by the time it went into syndication.
Absolutely. One last quick question with a quick answer, if you've got one. Do you have an example? This is from Emma. Do you have an example of a crime committed by a woman which shocked even you with all the experience behind you? A crime committed by a woman that shocked you?
Yeah, there's certainly a number of them. Eileen Wuornos was a very violent serial killer who had reason to hate men, but did not have reason to turn that into becoming a serial killer. But probably the ones that shock me the most are unfortunately mothers who kill their children.
Yeah. Okay.
Very difficult thing. Yes.
Emma also wants the access to your TV channel. Is that Criminal Minds on YouTube or something she can get?
Criminal Minds is on Netflix, and it's I believe on Paramount Plus.
Paramount
probably
Plus.
Get it there as well.
Criminal Minds.
Yes, Criminal Minds.
Sorry, this is a big case here, the Madeleine McCann case. Have you ever seen that case in Portugal? You're
of course, I'm very well aware of it. Kathy Canning and Tia Hoffer are the two profilers that actually went there and profiled the case. They also always believed that the parents were not involved in the abduction and death of Madeleine. And I think recently Germany has announced that that's pretty much the case.
Finally gone. Jim, stay with us. Don't fall asleep whilst I tell everybody what we got coming up on Purpose, Passion, Git, that I'm going to come back to you. I'll nudge you awake if you.
Okay.
May 24th, the great Alistair Hignell is with Christine Clara Truman Janes, a former tennis player who was active in the mid-1950s, mid-1970s. Singles Grand Slam title at the French Championships, finalist at Wimbledon and the US Championship. That's May 24th. May 31st, Rosie Stanzer, a polar explorer and a Goldster host. Which is more challenging, we wonder. Rosie is with Charles Blackmore, a soldier explorer, leader of a trans-Taklamakan desert expedition. That's in northwest China, the first expedition by foot across the Taklamakan. June the 7th, my lovely Goldster co-host Lucinda with Bernard Pourier, an expert in whale and dolphin conservation. And June 14th, I'm with Heidi Mansfield. As a teenager, Heidi knocked on the door to start work on what she thought was a nursery. It turned out to be a nursery, but one for disabled children with severe special needs. She has never looked back and is now trustee for a charity called Activity Station. And for Inside Story on Thursday this week, Lucinda is with Brian Patton, a brilliant poet who wrote stunning lines in the 1960s and 70s to match the Merseyside music coming out of Liverpool. That's on Thursday. Are you a poet, Jim, in all your writing?
Well, actually, one time I did a spoken word performance at the Poetry Lounge in Los Angeles about my experiences on 9/11. So I guess I am.
You are, so a poet as well as everything else. Now, our show is Purpose, Passion, Grit, and you are a profiler, which we've asked you about. Would you be able to detect the special character traits in somebody who is going to get through something, going to overcome the obstacles, maybe somebody a bit like yourself, whatever life's thrown at them?
Well, it's very difficult to predict human behavior because we have free will, but if somebody has had a difficult experience in life, it actually gifts them the ability to fight further into the future. In other words, there are many cases like mine where somebody has gone through something terrible when they were a kid, but then they were given the tools to overcome obstacles that came to them in the future that they overcame because they had that experience and they were a winner.
Right. So that's the sort of thing, that sort of metal, that steel that you find.
Yes.
Is because of what life throws at you. If life throws nothing at you, you don't get any steel.
You're not prepared for other things that are going to happen.
We have lots of things. I'm going to read some of these to you, Jim, and then we have a question, a really controversial one, which we're going to.
Okay.
Jean Joyce, excellent discussion. Jean, thank you for your questions. Angie, fascinating talk. Great session today, says Sue Townley. Thank you very, very much, Jim. Wish we had more time. I do too. This was absolutely brilliant. Maria Collins, fascinating talk. I'm into crime writing, and this was interesting. This is Emma, who, Geeta, thank you so much, Jim and Humphrey. But we have a question from Emma here because of what you experienced with the church and your Guantanamo and the war on terror and everything. We have 30 seconds to go. What are your views about religion in general? 30 seconds, Jim.
All right. Well, I can tell you this. I do not believe in organized religion. I am a very spiritual person. I believe God is the universe. Everything that exists is actually God. So we are part of God, and there's no reason to actually build a building and do rituals to actually commune with God, because God is everywhere.
There's no need for cathedrals and mosques and shrines and all that sort of stuff.
I think all those things do separate people, unfortunately.
Emma, I hope that's a great answer to your great, like you always send them in last, don't you, when we don't have any time. Thank you. That's it. We are out of time. The sun has still not risen in California. You are a great man. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your questions and comments. God, we've covered stretches. Fascinating. Thank you, Jim, and best of luck.
Thank you, Humphrey.
Yeah,
it was great chatting with you.
It was absolutely fantastic. The whole of Goldster wishes you the best of luck in your incredible work. We're going to watch out for your new series. And for your grit and your purpose and your passion. And Lucinda's here with Brian Patton, the Merseyside poet. Until then, thank you again, Jim. Stay involved, stay curious. Most of all, stay safe. Bye.
Bye.